All right, so it's me and Miguel Iterati back for another kind of MMA conspiracy hour. I know people have been waiting on it because people have asked me. And yeah, so we're back again, and we're going to get into the PFL Bellator sale, the Conor McGregor kind of incident in Miami, and a little bit of Ariel Helwani's kind of response to my PFL Bellator stuff. So first, and before we start, as always, check out Live to Fight Design on Instagram. They're a sponsor. If you use my promo code Todd Atkins, which you can see in red, you can get $20 off Fight Banner. We're actually running a kind of like a promotion, like a contest, where a fighter can get a free banner if you check out my page or Live to Fight Design. You'll see it. Now, Miguel, I think maybe we should start with the Conor stuff since that's the biggest stuff. Um, Now, the story itself, I mean, the girl's story doesn't necessarily look true. It looks like some of the stuff that's come out kind of disputes that. But I just wanted to ask you about, McGregor putting himself in that situation, kind of what your thoughts were on that.
Well, he's in the news again for a couple of reasons. I saw Michael Chandler calling him out for, not making the USADA testing, and therefore their fight is now, getting pretty officially off. And, so what was all that? Just another appearance and news and no fight. And, I don't think he's forgotten that he came from fighting. I think that's part of it, but I think he's a guy whose ego's out of control. And, it comes down to this. I'm going to talk to him here for this podcast like an AA mentor. Okay? And this is the thing about an AA mentor. If you listen and you accepted his advice, there's a path there. But he would probably shut me down and not listen. But it's interesting because the stuff that's happening around him, first, let's just say 2023 is going to go by the wayside, and he will not have fought. So all the talking, everything like that, another year has gone by of his prime where, maybe he's already exiting his prime. And we lost it because he's, at the bar. He can't sign up for USADA. He might have a cocaine problem. He's definitely still drinking. He's hosting people at his bars and stuff. There's a lot going on there. And then, when the fight came on, he told everybody he would snap to it. Well, none of that's happened. Observe that, because all of a sudden, now you're 35. Some of the behavior, being out on a run and having fun, and, you're going to have to recognize that it's beginning to look really not cool. It's like it's cool when you're 25. Now that at 35 and you're the kingpin of a 9-figure empire of money and businesses, and you have a wife who's stuck through you with a lot of problems, and you've said stuff in the media about loyalty to her, you're failing on a lot of points here, Conor. You may not want to admit that to anybody, or you may shun anybody who does that, but Conor is failing on many points. Number one, first and foremost, is he's a fighter who's not fighting. Why is all that happening? It's probably because he's distracted, this, that, the other stuff. He keeps putting chemicals in his head. That can't help. And again, when you're 25, you just passed the bar, or, in his case, became a world champion for the first time and stuff, and you went out and you hit the bar, go on a 3-day run, have fun. At 25, you can do that. Now, sitting on top of a 9-figure empire with a wife at home, that 9-figure empire is probably doing a lot to keep her there, that she's forgiving you for, but she is forgiving you for a lot of little sins that are public, including this one, because you shouldn't even be in that position. There's no way that you're in any location in public where everybody doesn't know who you are. He's gotten to that point of fame. He likes that. But, when somebody approaches him, they know he's got 9 figures in the bank. That could go a lot of ways. So here's the situation with Conor. Is he going to recognize that this behavior is not cool anymore? Because everything he says is he thinks he can handle it all. He's juggling it all. And the problem is, Conor has become a historical figure. Conor, from where he came from, fighting in the UFC, the way his magical run before Mayweather and then leading up to the Mayweather thing, that's a historic run. You can't deny that. Knocking out Aldo the way he did, taking Eddie Alvarez out with no, he's not. Those are Hall of Fame type fighters, world champions, and he dispatched them. And then he goes out and opens a business and makes $100 million practically overnight.
600. He sold his 600.
Yeah. What I forgot is the first 100 million came from the Mayweather fight.
Right.
And then he turns that into a business where he's now, sitting on almost as much, if not as much money as Dana White. He has no reason to think he's not in control of everything, if you look at it that way. But I'm pointing to all the little excuses and the brashness. You can't have a conversation like this with Conor. Hey, Conor, you're fucking up. Who is qualified? Is trainer, excellent dude. And, as an Irish guy, I think, if anybody was going to step up, he's a tough guy, he could be a mentor like that. And he really has chosen not to be here. And he probably is because he knows he won't be listened to. So, if you don't want Conor mad at you either. So he just kind of stays out of it. You know what I mean? And maybe he doesn't want, but a trainer, a father figure, somebody needs to break through to this guy, but he's got walls up. How can you tell him, look, you're not looking cool? He thinks, hey, he walks in and, wearing $200,000 worth of stuff, watches and rings and suits that are matched to his, when his beard changes color a little bit, he's got a suit that's matching to his beard color. I mean, tailored shit. He's got no reason to think he's on a path to destruction, but you really do have to look at the signs. Not fighting, not signing up for USADA. We knew 6 months ago when he didn't sign up for USADA and he had that whole thing. We knew this fight wasn't going to happen then, yet we chose to believe him. And whatever the UFC media machine was there, and or let him know, it's okay, yeah. And now guess what? He's not fighting anyway. Thanks, Conor. You know what? I don't drink anymore, so I'm only interested when you fight, and you haven't fought. So that's really about all I have to say about Conor McGregor.
The other thing is he hasn't been showing up for a lot of stuff on The Ultimate Fighter. I made a joke that I thought maybe the season would be more interesting if he coached his team like on a Zoom call from his yacht. That might be better television than what they're doing. No one's watching it, apparently. The ratings are terrible, even though they have Conor on there. It's horrible. And yeah, I don't know if it's just because that show has run its course, but yeah, he's looking bad on all fronts. And when he got into the situation, him and his wife just announced they were expecting their fourth kid on the same day.
Yeah. No, and here's the other part of it. To me, they put him on the TV and stuff, and maybe the ratings are low because some of what I'm saying has some truth to it. His act is old. He's no longer a 25-year-old yelling and, it comes out the next time, oh, he's got more tattoos and stuff like that. He's burnt. He's 35. And even though if he gets sharp, like he's an elite athlete, so if he gets sharp, I'm sure he'll be ready for his next fight if he ever has one. But we've also seen him go through down periods where he's bloated or possibly got on steroids to get bulked up and, he couldn't run with his foot until he healed, right? So whatever, again, sounded like a bunch of justifications and denials and things like that. All of it, none of this whole painting, it smears out, yeah, he's got money. Yeah, but he hasn't fought in X amount of time. He's been in the media for all the wrong reasons X amount of times. And every time, this point is, they're not even watching the TV show because he's not interesting anymore. Could that be catching up to him? He's not realizing it, and maybe he needs to realize that.
Yeah. The other thing about this, him not being in the pool, which I had announced also. What do you think about him missing? Is it just par for the course as far as his behavior goes?
Yeah, I think that if he's crossed the line into chemical dependence, one way or another, alcohol being the highest candidate, right? But if he's crossed over into there, then you have no idea how you're going to twist things around. He's a guy who's used to getting things done, right? So, hey, sure, I'll go film in Vegas. What are you going to not have in Vegas? But again, he's not fighting. I don't, why that is. I wonder what he's going to say, because whatever he's going to say is going to be well worth watching, because he's going to ignore a lot of the things I pointed out.
Now, kind of wanted to switch subjects here. Recently we saw that Ray Sefo said, kind of confirmed, that PFL is in talks with Bellator, but he also said those will be finalized in due time, which seems like an odd thing to say, because you're usually not going to finalize something that you don't intend to complete. So I just wanted to see what your opinion was on that, because he kind of even maybe gave more of a confirmation than Coker in a way. What do you think about it?
Okay. First and foremost, I think that this whole presentation or lack of presentation, when you throw in the Ngannou stuff, they had a media outburst, but again, that's, like I said, what do you do for an encore? Okay, everybody, and they're not going to deliver Ngannou until next, Dana mentioned there's something like you don't do that. They needed to have his opponent sign and need to be telling everybody what the match is and pumping that up like hell, because it would probably be in December. But they didn't do that. They're off on this other path here where they're not communicating much. We got the Ngannou signing, but then everything else is up in the air. These guys are fighting one for second. They have no shot at ever reaching the UFC's level. Zero. This is how you rate companies. Okay. If my company is able to offer everything the UFC offers, which is crappy anyway, but if I'm able to offer everything the UFC offers, then the fighter might be able to choose, which one they like better. But until then, they're always going to take where there's more money. So everything there, the UFC is definitely a better package and a better place for their fighters to be in. So these fighters are going to PFL as a second place. With that firmly said, and they're acting like a second place, here's the situation. Watch, what was the name of the executive? Dan Davis? I know it had like two N's in there somewhere.
Yeah, Don Davis. Yep.
That's what it is. Where's he? What does he think of what Ray Sefo said? Remember when Dana took over the UFC, shut down. Nobody talked about the company except Dana. These guys already are a two-headed monster with, one guy telling stories. Dan Davis, I know, look, in business or whatever, I'm sure his name resonates. But in MMA, the fighters, they don't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
So he needed to be a sustained presence, not just like a drive-by telling people, we're going to move PFL Africa up a couple of years. How many times have the fighters been literally given hand jobs like that before? Because that's what that looked like, and he disappeared. Now Ray Sefo's saying they haven't finalized anything. They don't, he doesn't know anything going on. It's a B-class job that they're doing already. So,
but it does seem like what I said is going to happen. Do you agree?
Well, God, it's been a couple of months now, and now there are other people that are chirping it and stuff, but you were the very first one who mentioned that Bellator and the PFL were in bed. You sustained people poo-pooing the idea and then taking the idea and not giving you credit for it. And that's the way it's always going to be, because these other people are sitting in an office, waiting for the news to come to them. So more power to them. And yes, it does seem like more of a confirmation, but wasn't there something weird where like Bellator made an announcement, or someone in Bellator said AEW? What was that? What was that story again?
No, Ariel Helwani, I guess in response to my report, he wanted to kind of mention who he had hurt because he had originally said there were two players that he had hurt, but he didn't name them. So this time, yesterday, I believe it was, he said one was Liberty Media and the other was the Khan family, which owns AEW and I think the Carolina Panthers, maybe. And
Yeah.
already the
And
AEW head,
I think they also own like Manchester United or some shit
yeah,
like that. Not a
already
major.
the AEW head has come out and said that what Ariel Hawani said is just complete BS. So
Yeah. Thank God for modern media too, because in the old days he would have gotten away with that, and the wrestling industry wouldn't even have heard, and they would have ignored him, and it would have sounded a little more plausible. I'm glad they poo-pooed it. I guess people don't remember when Bellator in the Bajorn Redney days used to try to do wrestling crossovers and sent Tito over there and made a mess of things in the ring and stuff like that. I think that was more with they tried to mix it up over there with Rampage and things like that. Bellator already dipped their toes into the wrestling world and fell flat on their faces, had nothing to add in any way, shape, or form. So why would AEW be interested in a B class organization? Only another one, PFL, like, another B class organization swallowing another one, a C class.
now I wanted to ask you about, I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but why do you think Ariel Hawani's so been out of shape over all this?
Look, you know, Ariel is, with when you look at the hits on the internet, he's the biggest reporter, and whatever word he wants to attach it, the most prestigious, the most recognized, the most important, Any one of those things, he can superficially say, look at my hit count and claim that to be true. And sorry. And he can claim that to be true. But the bottom line is you look at the way the industry does react to him. Even Dana, Dana, for all his faults, he's not on the right line with Dana. He doesn't have as many friends among the fighters. And this is what this may be because of lack of an invitation and stuff. But as the number one reporter in the sport, I would hold him to a standard of being at the shows. Like, let's do some reporting. Let's get it. Right there when they're there. They don't let you at the octagon. Get the guys at the after fight party. Put a mic in their face. Tape something. Record something. Hey, you got a little bit of money. Bring a guy with a camera and knock it out. But there's not. He's sitting in his office waiting for information to come to him.
Yeah,
So
and he's burned so many bridges, he can't do that now.
So whoever told him that AEW was the other one, maybe he made it up, thinking that there wouldn't be any repercussions. But, if somebody told that to him, now he's got to wonder about his sources. And that's what I'm saying is, I don't remember him ever having a reputation for being a road warrior, being there with the fighters. If you're interviewing the fighters and when they won the belt, they didn't look around and see you somewhere. They have that moment of recognition there in their heads. Then you're just another dude. Just another dude.
Yeah, and I think because of some of the issues he's had with fighter management, not just promoters, but fighter management, I think not as many people are coming to him with information as they used to.
Yeah, all that stuff it depends on how much work you put into it. Cyclical. I think, I don't even really follow him, but I think he had like a major backer or a major company that he worked with and then left and is kind of on his own. And he rebuilt himself back up, but he took a step back in that point that he hasn't recovered to the point where he was at his high point. So he's definitely another guy who's trying to reach the position he used to be in because it's deteriorated. And that goes with contacts and everything. I mean, he's not getting the hits he was. Was it ESPN he worked for? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck. If he thinks his sponsored website is going to reach ESPN's levels.
Right. Let me ask you this. There's one more thing I want to ask you about. Ngannou and Jones had this face off at PFL. Jones is wearing this PFL t-shirt. What do you make of that? It seems like this is happening more with the UFC than it used to. You had Conor at BKFC. You had Jones at PFL, and he's wearing the shirt. I would think before he would have not worn the shirt at least. It's almost like they're all kind of not afraid to step on the UFC a little bit.
Well, what you're seeing with Conor and John, you're seeing the highest paid guys on the roster not being loyal. That's a bad sign, because when the top guy's being paid, on your roster were, say, Chuck Liddell and BJ Penn. BJ maybe wasn't so loyal all the time, but when they had the title belts and they were on their runs and stuff, Chuck is the perfect example. The loyal soldier to the end of his career. And, Dana may have gotten used to that, and now he doesn't give a shit anymore. Enough people have probably, I do think Dana's suffering from that. I saw something recently, too, that, like, his higher-ups, the guys that own Endeavor or whatever the company is were pushing this power slap stuff. Things are so distorted in this sport. There's no real, it's an old-time argument, is it sport or spectacle? And, with the rules and the commissions and this, everybody can now say sport. But it truly is just spectacle at this point. Jones is in a good position because he's the only, now with Conor. So did this happen right after we were sure Conor didn't? So the other guy, only guy that makes more than him is not fighting. So John is the kingpin of the UFC right now.
Yeah.
And John's a guy with an ego. We might be having a conversation similar to Conor at some point. We've had it already for John. If he's at least overcome the chemical stuff, he still has some ego there, And I think that's what it is. He did it because he can.
Yeah, but like you were saying before, like a few years ago even, guys wouldn't have thought to do that. There was more of an iron fist over the UFC than there is now. And, we've talked about this a little bit on our show. It kind of feels like Dana's mailing it in a little bit. Even with the Ultimate Fighter, McGregor's mailing it in. He's hardly ever there. He doesn't show up for any of the post-show discussion like Chandler does for every. Even though McGregor's living in Vegas, he could easily do that stuff. He doesn't. It's like everyone's mailing it in. Almost everyone.
Look, life itself is, many faceted. Dana's is another guy like Conor. Dana's been on an even longer and possibly more successful run, right? So I think Dana at this point is like not a drinker and, not known for that aspect of it, but he's got an ego that manifests itself all the time. And again, when you can beat your wife in public and you really suffer no repercussions for it, who's going to tell you, hey, you're in your 50s at this point, some of that tough guy act isn't cool. Maybe he's recognizing that's why he's toning down. He'll like toning down because he was so successful. But it's actually, if he takes a step back, it might be the right thing to do. I sort of picture him as like a Bob Arum type where, if I live to be 80, there's fucking Dana going to be sitting there still in the UFC doing stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, I think he's a lifer in the sport, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe he has moved on. It does have that feeling of that. And, the other part of it is, we've tried to analyze what Endeavor thought. I know for a fact that when Endeavor sold to the Fertittas, part of that paperwork in there was a contract involving Dana in his career, that he would be in charge of the fight operation, whatever. And Dana understood that intrinsically, or else he wouldn't have stayed. At the same time, so we've thought, they've got like this guy they can't fire in there, and it's caused problems. But at the same time, they also got a guy who was on an incredible run. So they may be also buying into the Dana mystique. Yeah, we'll back power slap. There was some company, one of the executives were like, why are Endeavor asking us to cancel legitimate TV shows to put Power Slap. I saw something about this stuff in there. And yeah, even the pay-per-view UFCs at this point, there are a lot of fighters on there that you're not seeing top shelf MMA. So they watered down the product. It's out there, it's saturated. You can watch it every weekend, and that's why, the PFL waiting to put on a fight, waiting till next year to announce it is just savagely stupid. You know how many, the UFC could fix the McGregor thing, roll John Jones out there, and right there, those two title fights will successfully do better pay-per-view numbers or whatever than anything Ngannou's going to do in the PFL, especially as they keep waiting.
What do you think about last weekend? The UFC had a show, Apex show, and Dana White was like an hour away from me, an hour and a half away from me in Grove, Oklahoma, promoting some Nitro Cross event.
You're leading me in a world of speculation. Dana's definitely diversified, and the UFC, he's not as driven by the UFC and the product there as he was in the past, because he was at every show. Literally, you can't say in 2007 he missed 9 out of the 40 shows, or they had less shows at that point, but you get the point. Like, even in 1 year he did 37 of the 38 shows. No, he never used to miss a show.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think when he put the thing in his backyard, but he's diversified. Grove, Oklahoma, I don't a motocross event. Now I'm totally in the world of speculation, but this is motocross, the Power Slap, the Fertitas also were rumored to be into skateboarding. It would be something that I would have to research, but I wouldn't be surprised if their end goal is to somehow take gambling on those sports. I don't know how you work a competition, but that's probably what they're working on, is to have competition so people can bet on, the Power Slap may even have odds on it already on the internet. That's the closest. But I don't know how you do it in BMX or, some of the skateboarding or some of the other things, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's the end goal, because that was the end goal with the UFC. They were bought by a casino.
I want to ask about one more thing. There's talk that Ngannou might be on the undercard of a fight in December in the Middle East, maybe Saudi Arabia, to fight Derek Chisora. That might not be such a bad fight for him, do you think?
Chisora's a little burnt out, and Chisora is a guy who's had his ups and downs. There's some people who thought at some points in his career that he was a little unstable. But that guy knows more boxing than Ngannou's ever going to pick up.
Right, but even Eddie Hearn said he likes that fight better for him than Fury or Joshua.
They need to do. I agree that if they're going to do something in boxing, it needs to be
something he can win, right? You need him to win at least one fight.
Right, that's the point. But then that puts more time between that and his, the PFL debut. But that makes sense. That's where, like, I know we did a podcast on it, and I hate to, kind of rehash my own garbage, but Sonny Bill in Australia would have been. They claim PFL claims to be an international company. Make the fight, a boxing fight, happen in Australia with one of the legendary rugby players down there, a guy who's 10-1 as a boxer. And if Ngannou can handle him, the guy's as physically impressive. It looks like a good fight. And in Australia, you'll fill up a stadium.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need, worldwide, it isn't going to break pay-per-view numbers. but you'll create a huge live event, and anybody who does watch it is going to see something spectacular. And if Ngannou wins, then you can set up the big fight. But then I ask you, when will we see him in the PFL ring?
Because if I'm PFL, I don't want my investment getting his butt kicked before he fights in my promotion.
Just
Unless it's Tyson Fury or something, I might say, okay, that's all right.
That's exactly the point. And here's the problem is Chisora is just as capable, maybe more capable of a knockout than Fury. Fury might dance with him and just outbox and humiliate him. Maybe he sets up the knockout in a beautiful way because he's becoming that, that kind of show. But, Chisora at the end of the day is a guy that, will get down and dirty. He's not a guy who's going to be intimidated. He's going to be. Chisora is not the right opponent. He's too skilled a boxer in my book. He's not the right opponent because if he realizes the opportunity in front of him for money and stuff and takes it seriously and comes in like he did for one of the Fury fights where he was at his peak, he should also run over him. You're still talking about a top 20, heavyweight boxer against a novice.
Interesting. It's interesting to hear your take.
I would rather him fight Joshua. Maybe Joshua's a bigger name, he gets a bigger rub. I think Joshua's less threatening to him than Chisora, because with Chisora, you run into the thing of a burnt-out boxer who's been to the top, who recognizes you're putting him on the big stage again. He's getting another shot at it. If that clicks for him, he's a good enough boxer. He'll kill Ngannou. Come on.
Because Hearn said he talked to Joshua. Joshua's, like he said, Joshua's the boss. Even though I speak for him, he's the boss. He said he talked to Joshua, and Joshua's like, no, I'm trying to do something in boxing still. I still have aspirations to beat Fury and, whoever else. I don't want to fight Ngannou.
Good for him. And I'll tell you why he's capable of doing that. It's because Eddie Hearn did his job with him from the very beginning, and he's already got money for his kids' college in the bank. So he's not looking for a big payday. That's not what's interests Joshua. And I'm glad he's still thinking legacy and stuff, because hopefully he'll give us some great boxing again in the future. That would be a good ad. But again, in that situation where he's already been to the top, he walks into a match with Ngannou where he outmatches him in boxing. He's boxing against a non-boxer. So, how does he get motivated for that? Chisora will be motivated by a $5 million payday. It'll probably be more than that. And if that's the case, I would consider Chisora more dangerous and much less name recognition.
Yeah, if I win, there's a bigger pot of gold at the end of this rainbow for me.
I mean, he's already been in the ring with Fury a couple of times. Yeah. And those are his best paydays, right? So, hey, he's got to feel like, I want that guy again. If he doesn't, that's okay. Just you've inserted yourself, an extension of your career a little bit at a higher level. You're going to start to fade a little bit here, but this puts you right back in a big spotlight. I wouldn't do that fight if I was Ngannou. That's what I would say.
Well, Miguel, it's always interesting to get your take on this stuff. There's always great stuff. And are you still doing some stuff with the collector that you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. The MMA Collector and the MMA Museum website is still an ongoing project. I'm now working at a dog rescue in Costa Rica, and eventually I'll probably have a donation request for all our millions of fans out there and stuff like that. Not like a request, but put out there, it's a really eye-opening business. It's really, it's been really rewarding. I've been only at it for a couple of weeks, but it's just something completely different. And I've been dedicating time to that, but I'm going to keep going with some of the MMA stuff that I've got going. I'm just not adding anything new.
Yeah. All right, Miguel, it's always great talking to you. And to everybody that supports the MMA Conspiracy Hour stuff, we appreciate it. And until next episode,